Hey everybody, welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. I'm Kristen and I search out these true stories every week to present them to you guys. And they always have that one miracle. And we're just going to go ahead and dive on into the story for today. A man named Lee Sellick. He loved climbing, he loved hiking, and one day he and two friends by the name of Steve and Kevin, the three of them, it was a beautiful summer day, they decided to climb the North Mountain in Central Oregon. Why not? What beautiful weather, they were experienced, so they set out. After lunch, the three of them got up and they began to climb again. They were climbing over shale and big boulders. Now, what shale is, I didn't know what it was, so I looked it up. It's extra fine sedimentary rock. Did I say that right? Sedimentary rock. Anyways, it's very small, minuscule little rocks and things like that. So they were walking over that in the big boulders, and Steve was in the lead, Lee behind him, and then it was Kevin in the rear. Each man was about 100 or so yards apart from each other. Now that shale, like I said, it was very fine, so it was slippery, and it just more energy to walk on it. So Lee decided to just walk on like the rocks instead, just to be safe and save some energy. And when he came upon a giant boulder, he decided to kick at it. He wanted to make sure that it was stable, that it wouldn't move before he jumped on top of it. Well, when he kicked it, it wouldn't budge, so he figured, all right, hopped on top of it. As he did so, this 2,500-pound boulder broke loose. As it began to roll, Lee flew backward, downhill, unfortunately. It is said when he landed and he kind of was like in the fetal position, and he landed on his pack that he had on his back or on his shoulder, but he landed on that and he was like in a fetal position, and he looked up and that huge 2,500-pound boulder had his leg pinned. And what it had done is it said it had actually hit his ankle, and then it had pinned the left leg against another big boulder. Well, of course, Lee was frantic. He didn't know what to do. I'm sure that hurt like you know what. And he can't move. He tried to jerk his leg loose, but it wouldn't budge. And I mean, I'm sure he was in crazy pain. And as he laid there with not being able to do a thing to help himself, he just kind of thought in defeat, I am going to die here. And he was scared that should that big boulder continue to roll that has his leg pinned, it would roll right over his legs, body, and head. It would kill him for sure. So Lee tried to put his hand, it said, remember he's in the fetal position. He said the boulder was kind of towards his rear. So he put his hand on it and, of course, it's not moving. So he just, didn't even think about it. He just yells out, "Get this rock off of me." And wouldn't you know it, that rock rolled 6 inches to the right, out of nowhere, after he yelled that out. Who did it? God? Angel? Whoever did it, they moved it 6 inches, and he was able to get free. And Lee says he remembers saying right as it was happening, he was like, "That's weird." And after that, he rolled the rest of the way down the hill to try to get out of the way into safety. Now, this terrain, this hill itself was so steep. So when he decided to roll the rest of the way down, when he actually landed standing up and facing uphill. And of course, he saw just a ton of blood, so it scared him. He didn't know if it was life-threatening. I mean, he seemed okay. He was standing, he was looking down at his legs, but he was scared because of the amount of blood he was seeing. Thank goodness they were not life-threatening. And as he stood there, he began to apply pressure to one of his legs for this bleeding to stop. And that's about the time Kevin got down the hill to him. And Kevin happened to be a medical student, so this was great. He was able to assess the situation and all of Lee's injuries. And shortly after Kevin got down there is when Steve also got down there to help. And they helped him kind of get to a safer spot free from any big boulders or anything like that. Now, the assessing of the injuries that Kevin saw, the boulder itself had hit Lee's ankle, as we said. Fortunately, though, it was not broken. It did crush a lot of the soft tissue and it tore off a lot of the skin, and that is where you have a big amount of the blood. But again, even though all the skin was scraped off the tibia, which is a lower leg bone, still no broken bones. There was also a deep puncture wound from which blood was coming out of, but they were able to get the bleeding stopped. And Lee ended up asking his buddies, "What in the world? Did you see what happened?" And Kevin said, that the last thing he remembers is he heard a rock break away. He saw Lee flying downhill head first, and he just saw him disappear. And when he came down the hill, he saw, Lee standing there looking down, assessing his own legs. And, the rest is history. He starts assessing them and all that. So the men were able to radio for help, and Lee was taken to St. Charles Hospital in Bend, Oregon. And he had to be care flighted there. And as he got to the ER, interesting, the treating doctor actually had a similar injury. He loved to hike, and he had a crushing injury to his lower leg not too long ago. So he assessed Lee's leg, and he saw that there was just a ton of swelling. And he told Lee, and he even showed him his own scar on his leg. He said that when he had the same injury, that actually a cut had to be made. And that kind of let fluids, and also it's called weeping, things to come out of the leg. That way it doesn't swell so much that it cuts off the circulation, and then you have to have an amputation. And so that was the threat right now, that Lee might have to have his leg amputated. The doctor said, "We're going to monitor things. We'll keep an eye on it very carefully, and you might have to have that same procedure." All in all, he told Lee, "You're looking at about a 4 to 6 week stay in the hospital." Well, Lee asked a question to the doctor that day, and he said, "Hey, doc, have you ever heard of pineapples helping with swelling?" The doctor kind of looked at him skeptically and was like, "No, I've never heard that." And Lee said, "Well, I'm going to try it." He, of course, again, saw the skepticism on the doctor's face, but Lee didn't care. He was going to try it. And I'm sure the doctor didn't see any harm. If you want to eat a pineapple, go ahead. They were going to monitor him anyway. So that night, Lee phoned up a friend. He had a buddy that lived in Bend, Oregon, and he asked him to bring him a pineapple. The friend brought it that night, and Lee ate the whole thing that night. For the next several days, he repeated this. He had a friend bring another pineapple. He'd eat the whole pineapple, one whole pineapple a day. And the doctor would call him, because he hadn't been back in personally to see him yet, but he'd call him, for a few days and ask him how he's feeling, how are things going. And Lee would tell him, "I'm eating the pineapple, doc, and guess what? There's no swelling or bruising today." And, the doctor's probably like, "That's great." But until the doctor actually showed up for a visit to assess him physically there. And when he came in to examine Lee, he actually discharged him and said that he could go home and continue healing at home. That's how much the swelling had gone down, and no bruising. So the next week at home, Lee ate 4 pineapples all on his own and, of course, rested. And wouldn't you know it, a week later, Lee was able to return to work. That's crazy. He just had his leg crushed. I know what I'm going to do if I ever have any swelling. I'm going to try the pineapple thing. No joke. Anyways, Lee saw 2 miracles come out of this situation. He says, "Hey, that boulder didn't crush me. It could have crushed my whole body. It did crush my leg, but I lived to tell the tale." And he says that, when he called on God, "Get this rock off of me," exactly that happened. The rock moved 6 inches to the right. He saw number 2 miracle. He said, "Hey, my recovery was 1 week, not 4 to 6. And like all of these stories, guys, that people that experience these miracles, myself included, they all say the same thing, that their faith was increased, that it strengthened. Like, It's unexplainable. I get chills when I talk about it. But that's what happened and still occurring to people that have miracles. Lee also says that, that day, that boulder, it should have kept rolling. There's no way a 2,500-pound rock should have stopped like it did. Should have rolled right over me. He believes, we just explained, that when he called out to God, he was saved. Whether God had an angel move it or he moved it himself. Lee also says that in the real world, in today's everyday life, he says, we all come upon difficulties and hardships, but he says that any time those happen, he just doesn't fear them as much like he used to. He doesn't worry about them as much like he used to. He knows it's going to be fine because he knows God's bigger, and because he experienced those miracles. And he says, quote, "Indeed, nothing can touch us if God determines that we still have work to do for him." End quote. Love that. Love that. So I'll leave it at that, guys. Let me know what you thought about this story. Any feelings, anything similar, let me know. I love hearing about it. Also, remember to like and subscribe. And then, of course, it's the new year, so as I try to build my channel and just reach people, I am trying to do it full time. So I have recently added my PayPal into the description should anybody ever feel on their heart that they wanted to give to help out. Of course, that's not necessary, and it's even hard for me to ask for that because I feel bad about it. But at the same time, I do have to make a living eventually, and I hope to do that from this, doing something I love and that I'm passionate about, and that, most importantly, I feel God has called me to do. So I love you guys, and I thank you for watching, and I hope these miracles touch your life like they do mine. And most of all, I hope that you see that there's a God up there that does these miracles and allows these miracles to happen. They happen every day. They happen every day. Thank you again, guys, and I am going to see you guys for the next one.